Imagine you are standing at the absolute edge of a really rugged, muddy dirt bike track.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The engines are just roaring, the smell of exhaust is super thick in the air, and the ground is like literally vibrating beneath your feet.
It sounds pretty intense.
Right. And suddenly, someone just shoves you onto a bike, aggressively revs the throttle for you, and screams, "Go!"
Oh, wow.
And this is all before you have even had a single second to, strap your helmet on or scan the first turn.
I mean, it sounds like a fast track to a panic attack, honestly. You wouldn't just be unprepared in that scenario. Your entire nervous system would basically seize up.
Exactly.
You have absolutely no mental map of where the bumps are, no idea how tight the corners are, and just zero feel for how to steer through that specific, highly volatile terrain.
It would be complete and utter chaos. But here's the thing. For a lot of people, particularly those with neurodivergent brains, that terrifying sensation of being violently shoved onto a loud, unpredictable track without a map, it isn't some rare, extreme sports nightmare. It is literally just a Tuesday morning. It's exactly what waking up, walking into a busy school hallway, or, logging into a frantic corporate environment feels like.
Which I think completely reframes the assumptions we make about how human beings process the world. Society tends to operate on this default expectation that everyone should be able to just wake up, hear the starting pistol, and instantly jump into the race at top speed.
And dismantling that expectation is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to our deep dive.
Glad to be here.
So our mission today for you listening is to gain a really fast, incredibly thorough understanding of how different brains process the world around them. And we are exploring this through a source that is genuinely one of a kind.
It really is.
It's a guidebook called My Brain Needs a Warm-Up Lap. And what makes this material so unique is that the author, Taaha Muhammad, is a teenager.
Which is just incredible.
It is. He wrote this manual specifically for adults, for parents, for teachers, and, for future employers. Okay, let's unpack this. How refreshing is it to have a teenager handing a literal step-by-step instruction manual to adults rather than the adults pathologizing the teen?
It is a brilliant inversion of the usual dynamic. Usually you have researchers or clinical psychologists writing these very dry academic texts about how to, quote-unquote, manage neurodivergent individuals.
Yeah, lots of clinical jargon.
Right. And before we dive into his metaphors, it helps to briefly clarify what we mean here. When we talk about neurodivergent brains, whether we are talking about ADHD, autism, or sensory processing differences, we are fundamentally talking about a hardware difference.
A hardware difference.
Yes, a difference in how the brain filters stimuli and manages executive function. And Taaha just skips the clinical jargon entirely. He speaks directly from his lived experience.
Using this really vivid, sustained metaphor of riding electric dirt bikes to explain his internal cognitive landscape, right?
Yes, he essentially hands the reader his own personal rider profile, which is just so helpful.
So let's head straight to the starting line. He begins with something universally relatable, which is just waking up.
We all have to do it.
Right. And he points out that when he first wakes up, his internal state is actually quite calm. Like he's happy, but his brain is absolutely not ready to actually do anything yet.
Well, yeah, the engine is off.
Exactly. So if an adult rushes in with loud alarms or bursts into the room demanding immediate action, it's the equivalent of dropping him straight into the middle of a high-speed MotoGP race while he's, still in his pajamas.
The underlying mechanism here is really important. He makes a crucial distinction between what happens when the brain is on autopilot versus when it is engaged in deliberate thought.
Okay, break that down for us.
So for many neurodivergent individuals, transitioning between those two states takes a significant amount of cognitive energy. Most of the time, the brain is running background processes. Thoughts just kind of happen. He compares it to having an app running in the background of your phone that you just forgot to close.
Oh, so it's constantly draining the battery without actually doing anything productive for you.
Precisely. But real conscious thinking, like solving a complex problem at work or figuring out the logistics of your morning commute, that requires deliberate executive function.
It requires flipping a heavy cognitive switch.
Yes, and flipping that switch requires time. So Taaha explains that his morning routine, which might actually involve sitting and watching a really familiar TV show, is not him being lazy or avoiding the day.
Which is what a lot of people might assume.
Exactly. But that predictable TV show actually gives his brain a low-stakes, easy target to focus on while it slowly spins up the processing power. It needs that to make that critical transition from background autopilot to deliberate, ready thinking.
It's like letting an older car engine idle in the driveway on a freezing winter morning before you try to merge onto the highway. You don't just turn the key and immediately floor the gas pedal when it's 5 degrees outside.
No, you will destroy the engine.
Right, you have to let the oil circulate. But I do have to push back a little here on behalf of the parents or the managers listening right now.
Okay, let's hear it.
I can hear them thinking, okay, that sounds wonderfully empathetic in theory, but how can I actually tell the difference between my teen or my employee's brain doing vital prep work and someone just using this as an excuse to avoid a difficult task entirely?
That is such a fair question.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating here is that tension is exactly why his dirt bike analogy is so useful.
Yeah.
Particularly when we look at how people face new, unfamiliar environments. Or new tracks, to use his phrasing.
Okay, so what does avoidance actually look like?
True avoidance looks like backing away permanently. It looks like a flat refusal to engage with the environment at all. But preparation? That looks like intense observation.
Ah, I see.
When he encounters a new group of people or a totally new activity, his default is to go quiet and stand back. And to an adult or a manager, that often gets mislabeled as shyness, defiance, or just a total lack of motivation.
But underneath that silence, the gears are turning at maximum speed.
Oh, the cognitive gears are redlining. His brain is doing the vital work of mapping the territory. It's scanning the social scripts, noticing the cadence of how people are talking.
Looking for threats.
Exactly. Calculating the threat vectors to see if the environment is safe, and figuring out the entry point to join in. Think about an experienced rider arriving at a brand new dirt bike track.
They wouldn't just blindly launch their bike off a massive ramp they've never even inspected.
Never. They stand quietly at the side of the track, they watch the dirt, they observe how other riders are handling the tight corners, they gauge the angle of the jumps. That standing around isn't hesitation. It is critical preparation.
And he offers this incredibly practical piece of advice about how adults should actually offer encouragement in those moments. He notes that a gentle nudge, like an adult quietly saying, "Go on, just try it," actually is effective.
But the timing dictates everything there.
Exactly. If you deliver that nudge while his brain is still in the middle of mapping the track, it registers as an overwhelming demand. It essentially forces him to abort the mapping process entirely.
Right, which causes a crash.
But if you deliver that exact same nudge after he's had sufficient time to observe the room, it lands perfectly.
The psychological principle he is hitting on there is really profound. Confidence and motivation almost always come after action, not before it.
Oh, that's so true. We always wait to feel motivated.
Right, we have this societal myth that we need to wait until we feel perfectly motivated to start a difficult task. Taaha is highlighting that the feeling of readiness rarely arrives spontaneously. It usually shows up only after you've already started moving.
However, and this is the crucial caveat, you cannot safely start moving until your brain has mapped the track.
Exactly.
So let's follow that progression. The morning warm-up lap is complete. The new track has been successfully mapped from the sidelines. The rider is finally on the bike and moving forward.
They're in the race.
They are in the race. But the second you enter the race, the environment itself becomes the next massive hurdle. When we look at how he navigates external chaos, he describes sensory overload as a situation where there are simply too many riders on the track.
Picture a dirt track that is dangerously over capacity. Bikes are packed shoulder to shoulder, riders are cutting corners unpredictably, mud is flying everywhere, and the engines are just deafening.
It's too much.
When a physical track reaches that level of congestion, it instantly ceases to be a fun race and becomes a pure survival scenario. Your brain cannot track every moving hazard at once, so it panics.
And he translates that physical chaos directly into the experience of navigating loud, busy spaces in the real world. Think about a crowded school cafeteria or an open-plan corporate office or multiple overlapping conversations.
It's the exact same survival response.
Yeah, and we really need to look at the how here. A neurotypical brain has these automatic filters that just sort of tune out the hum of the fluorescent lights and the conversation 2 desks over.
Right, it happens subconsciously.
But Taaha's brain attempts to process every single sensory input with equal priority. It tries to keep track of every single bike on that crowded track simultaneously, and the system just crashes.
It has to.
When that happens, he says he literally needs to pull off the track. Stepping away into a quiet room isn't this dramatic antisocial behavior. It is a biological necessity to reboot the system.
And that sensory crash mirrors exactly what happens with cognitive chaos. Just as too much noise overwhelms the sensory system, A large, unstructured pile of verbal instructions overwhelms the executive functioning system.
Oh, absolutely.
If someone throws 5 complex directions at him in rapid succession, the brain just freezes. It creates an executive function traffic jam.
The instructions just blur together into one loud noise.
It's the internal equivalent of that crowded dirt track. There are too many starting points, too many potential paths, and no clear way forward.
Here is where the deep dive gets really interesting, because Taaha points out the sheer futility of how adults typically react to this freeze response.
Oh, we get this so wrong.
We really do. Think about the last time you asked someone to do a task and they just stared at you blankly. What is our default instinct? We repeat the exact same vague instruction, but we usually do it louder and we usually do it faster.
Which is the worst possible thing you can do.
Right. If we use the track analogy, it's like aggressively honking your horn at a traffic jam. It does absolutely nothing to clear the road. It just adds more noise to a system that is already failing due to sensory overload.
It is a phenomenal analogy. By repeating the vague instruction louder, you aren't clearing the path, you are just dumping more riders onto an already jammed track.
So what does he suggest instead?
What Taaha suggests is a technique borrowed directly from experienced dirt bikers. They don't yell instructions at you, they show you the riding line.
The riding line. It's such a brilliant, tangible concept.
It really is. In motorsports, the riding line refers to the absolute optimal path through a course. It's the specific route that makes the sharp corners manageable and the rough bumps smoother.
Okay, so if you don't know where the line is, you're essentially just guessing with every single turn.
You are hoping you don't crash. For someone experiencing cognitive overload, simply being told verbally what to do requires a massive amount of working memory. You have to hear the words, hold them in your mind, translate them into physical steps, and then execute.
Which is overwhelming if your brain is already busy processing everything else.
But showing someone the riding line, physically demonstrating the sequence of steps slowly, that bypasses that working memory bottleneck entirely. Seeing the path in action makes it click.
Because it completely eliminates the guesswork. You are no longer forcing the brain to evaluate 50 possible ways to execute a task. You are offering it the one clear, verified path that guarantees success.
Both sensory overload in a loud room and cognitive overload from vague instructions are fundamentally mapping failures. The brain cannot figure out where it is in relation to its environment.
That makes so much sense.
When a person is overwhelmed, handing them a clear, demonstrated line restores their sense of psychological safety. They no longer have to predict what's coming next because the path is laid out right in front of them.
Which naturally brings us to the actual execution, the gear required to ride that line safely. Because even if you know the optimal path, you cannot ride it without the right equipment, and crucially, you have to put that equipment on in a very specific order.
Yes, the sequence matters so much.
Let's look at how he tackles task sequencing. He uses the literal physical process of putting on his dirt bike gear to explain exactly why vague commands cause the brain to stall out.
If you look at a neurotypical brain, a vague command like get ready to go automatically unpacks itself into a neat series of subconscious subtasks.
Like find shoes, grab keys, put on coat.
Right. But for Taaha, get ready doesn't automatically unpack. It just sits there as a massive, abstract, impossible demand. Where's the starting line?
But if you break that command down into a rigid sequence, it becomes entirely manageable.
And in dirt biking, the sequence for gearing up is completely non-negotiable. First you put on the heavy boots, then the helmet, then the goggles, and only then do you put on the gloves.
The logic there is completely bulletproof. If you mess up the sequence and put the thick padded riding gloves on first, every single subsequent step becomes a physical impossibility.
Try buckling a tiny helmet strap or fine-tuning the fit of tight goggles while wearing bulky gloves.
It is an instant disaster. If you skip steps or if the instructions are randomized, a simple 5-minute task transforms into a frustrating, insurmountable wall.
And having a concrete sequence, knowing with absolute certainty that the boots always come first, that removes the anxiety of decision fatigue.
He relies on tools to help with this, right? Like pit stop summary tables.
Yes, pit stop tables and rider activity checklists. These are physical, numbered steps written out on paper. They externalize his working memory. He doesn't have to hold the sequence in his head. He just has to look at the list.
He also heavily advocates for sensory tools, because managing loud sounds, aggressive fluorescent lights, and unpredictable smells isn't just annoying for him. It is physically exhausting.
It completely drains his battery.
So he deploys specific tools. He uses noise reduction earmuffs, face masks to block smells, or software that actually reads dense text out loud to him. But here's the critical distinction he makes. He insists these accommodations are not shortcuts.
And they are absolutely not quote-unquote special treatment.
No.
He views them simply as the required gear for his specific biology. He likens it to a dirt bike rider who chooses to wear a specialized neck brace or an extra chest harness.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Now, not every single rider on the dirt track wears a neck brace. Some riders have different physical tolerances and can navigate the jumps without one. But if a specific rider knows that a neck brace keeps them safe and allows them to navigate the track more aggressively and confidently, they put it on. End of story.
So choosing to use sensory tools like noise-canceling headphones in a busy office doesn't mean the employee is broken.
Not at all. It demonstrates high self-awareness. It means they know exactly what gear they need to perform at their peak.
I hear that, but I have to admit I'm struggling a bit with the implications here, and I know our listeners are too.
Let's talk about it.
If I am a manager or a parent, and I am providing my team with step-by-step written checklists for every task, or if I'm letting someone wear noise-canceling headphones to tune out the office chaos, aren't I just micromanaging them?
That's a very common worry.
Doesn't that level of accommodation border on coddling? Like, are we not just making them entirely dependent on us in a world that ultimately isn't going to accommodate them?
It's the most common pushback we see, this fear that support inherently breeds fragility.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture and analyze the actual cognitive outcomes, Taaha's method achieves the exact opposite of dependence.
Really?
Yes, we have to view these tools, the checklists, the clear sequences, the earmuffs, as scaffolding. They are a bridge, not a permanent crutch. Providing a checklist isn't doing the cognitive work for the individual. It is providing their brain with the structured map it desperately needs to actually learn the terrain.
Oh, I see. So you are externalizing the map until the internal map is fully built.
Precisely. And think about it. We use externalized memory all the time in high-stakes environments. Commercial pilots use pre-flight checklists. Surgeons use pre-op checklists.
And we definitely don't call them coddled.
No, we call them professionals. Taaha writes that once those sequential steps become clear and physically familiar, the brain internalizes the writing line. Eventually, they can execute the sequence without looking at the prompt at all.
That's fascinating.
A simple, clearly written checklist taped to a wall does infinitely more to build true, lasting independence than 100 loud, vague verbal reminders from a frustrated supervisor. You hand them the map early on, specifically so they can navigate without you later.
So bringing this all together, what is the ultimate takeaway for you, the person listening right now? Because while this book was written by a teenager to help adults understand neurodivergent youth, the underlying truth is honestly far more universal.
It really is. Every single human being, regardless of their neurology, has a unique writer profile.
Absolutely. The thresholds for sensory overload or cognitive fatigue vary widely, but the mechanisms of how we process chaos, those are universal.
Completely universal.
Whether you are designing the onboarding process for a new corporate hire, leading a massive cross-functional team, or, just trying to navigate a chaotic morning with your family, recognizing that someone's brain might simply be taking its necessary warm-up lap fundamentally changes your relationship with them.
It transforms your immediate reaction from irritation to strategic patience.
Yes. It shifts your internal narrative from this person is actively ignoring me to this person is meticulously mapping the track so they don't crash.
It forces a mirror on our own environments and the systems we built. The real takeaway here isn't just interpersonal empathy. It is about intentional systems design.
How so?
If we design our workplaces, our classrooms, and our morning routines to accommodate the most sensory-sensitive people in the room by providing clear writing lines and reducing unnecessary noise, we don't just help them. We actually create smoother, far more efficient tracks that benefit everyone.
It really makes you evaluate the modern adult world. Think about our relentless corporate cultures. The expectation to just hit the ground running on day one of a new job.
Oh, it's everywhere.
The back-to-back, context-switching daily meetings. What if our highly structured adult systems actually adopted this teenage dirt bike logic?
It would be a radical redesign of how we define productivity, honestly.
Imagine how much higher our actual output would be, and realistically, how much less burnout we would all experience if we stopped demanding that every single colleague instantly jump straight into the MotoGP race of the workday.
Right, if we stop penalizing people for needing a quiet moment to observe the room.
Exactly. What if instead we made it standard practice to openly ask our teams, hey, what does your specific warm-up lap look like? What riding gear do you need to put on to perform at your absolute best today?
We would start valuing that time as the careful, deliberate preparation required for a highly successful ride.
So tomorrow morning, when that alarm goes off and the overwhelming chaos of your daily schedule is sitting right there waiting for you, remember that you do not have to hit the throttle immediately.
You really don't.
It is biologically okay to let the cognitive engine idle for a bit. It is perfectly fine to take your time putting on your boots before you reach for your helmet. Take your warm-up lap.
The track is still going to be there when you are finally ready to ride.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.